All right, how are you guys doing? Awesome, awesome. I feel really weird knowing now that I will be basically followed by pizza. Uh, so I'm gonna try really hard not to take forever. Um, but hey, it's gonna be a journey, honestly. So I'll be talking today about sort of my experiments and exploration of trying to get art-directed responsive images to work. Period. How many of you guys have actually explored art direction in your responsive images? Raise your hands. One person. Awesome. Okay, good. So this is going to be new for everybody else. Is everybody else comfortable with responsive images? Raise your hand. We did technically have a talk earlier on this today, so hopefully you were paying attention because I will not be covering the technical details because Anne did a much better job than I would have ever done. So let's get started. I'm going to go on an adventure. Sorry? What? Yeah, I'm going on an adventure with you guys today. So basically, I really love Lord of the Rings. And honestly, when I sort of proposed this talk, I had an idea of how it would go. And then as I was writing it and doing all this stuff, I realized that it wasn't going to go that way. So hence why we had a contract. And like in the movie, we just I found workarounds, found different things, and I'll be basically sharing all of the stuff that I learned. And hobviously that will be very, very helpful to you guys as you go ahead and try to sort of get your own art-directed responsive images. So the objective of the talk is to share my experiences doing this, and then finally I'm going to show you sort of what I've been able to come up with to automate this as well. And I'll give you an overview of some of the most popular tools out there, and hopefully you guys will find that really insightful. Yeah, that's sort of the objective of today. So on the agenda, I'll sort of cover what are art-directed responsive images and why we should actually care about these things, how to create some, and I'm going to show you some tools like using Smartcrop.js, Imgix, Cloudinary, and a whole bunch of other tools that I've found that sort of help you along this process. I'll show you how to deal with different backends. So I'm a Node developer. I do a lot of JavaScript and Node.js, so I have a solution for this inside Node. I also have some ideas for how you could do this inside WordPress and a solution for Ruby on Rails. So it doesn't matter what type of web app you like to build. Hopefully I'll have something that's very similar to other languages as well. And then finally, I'm going to show you how to build your own system and actually do this with your own code and sort of for free, because free is good, right? And you know, you only live once, so might as well do it yourself. And the other thing is I'll show you how to automate all this stuff with Webpack, Grunt, Gulp. So you'll see how you can actually automate this as part of your build tool and why that's an important thing. And you'll be able to actually integrate this whole concept directly into your workflow and your build chain. So I'm assuming you guys know HTML5, right? CSS3, responsive web design, JavaScript. You all good? Okay. These slides will be made available on SlideShare, so if you want to check them out, it'll be on slideshare.net/Rami Sayar right after this talk. If you have questions or anything, feel free to follow me at Rami Sayar. I'll be happy to answer questions, tell you a little bit more about my experiences with certain tools, and hopefully, if you have any other questions, I'll be able to help you out. So my name is Rami. I'm a technical evangelist. So that means I actually get to work with developers as part of my job. I go to conferences, go to events, go to startup hubs, co-working spaces. I help developers build their technologies, ideally on Microsoft's platforms, but that's not a necessity. I actually don't really care. I will help you build your stuff on web, open source technologies, whether it's Python, PHP, Node.js, JavaScript, whatever it is, I'm here to help you guys out. And the best way to reach out to me is actually through my Twitter. That's what I look like without a beard, hence why I have one now. That joke is always funny. I don't know why. Cool, so let me just give you a quick primer on responsive images. I know that we covered this already, but I'll just do it just in case you forgot or you weren't there for that talk. So the first point I sort of want to make is that responsive web design, I think we should just start calling it web design. I think we can just drop the responsive, because for the most part, all web design is now has to be responsive web design. It's no longer something that you could charge extra for. It's something that you have to do. Otherwise, your website will just not work as well on all the multitude of platforms and devices and browsers that people are using today. As part of this whole movement toward responsive web design, what has happened is, as we were building all this stuff, designers and web developers sort of realized that, hey, images need to scale as well. They need to be responsive to the formatting, the size, the aspect ratio, whatever, of my site design. And in fact, I sometimes actually want to do a lot more creative stuff with my images than just being able to scale them up and sort of resize them. I sort of want to be able to do a little bit more and sort of direct the art a little bit better, hence the term art direction, and be able to sort of, decide, hey, I want to use a different image when the device is in landscape mode and it's an iPad, so it's sort of got a higher resolution, bigger screen, versus when it's on a phone. So all of this has eventually ended up with a movement towards responsive images. There was a working group, and then eventually what happened was, before we got to the whole picture sizes and source set, there was a whole bunch of different stuff that happened. Lots of JavaScript libraries that sort of let you do responsive images. At one point when the iPad was first released with Retina display, there was this library that would basically just swap the image to a 2x version if you were loading on an iPad. But all of these techniques, these polyfills, eventually sort of morphed into an actual standard. That's the picture element. You've got sizes as well and source set. They're also standard. You can use those with the image tag. You don't actually have to use the pictures. And to sort of just give you a quick overview, what does source set do? It basically allows you to specify a comma separated list of images, and you can actually describe which image to use for which basically like property. So these descriptors would basically say, hey, if I added 2x, basically what I'm trying to say is use this image inside this source set that for any time that the device pixel ratio is quite high. The W is for any time that I want to specify an image with a width constraint. And I'll show you a sample code just so you can see how this all actually ends up in the code. Sizes basically allows us to describe how many pixel an image needs. So this is something that's interesting. So basically we're telling the browser how much we think that this image will need. And then as a result, the browser will actually get the appropriate sized image. So all that basically gives you code that looks like this. You've got the picture and source tag as well, so this allows you to do art direction and select the images based on the breakpoints that you want and the media queries. So let me actually just dive into the code so you can see sort of what's actually happening with the responsive images. So here what I've got is I've got this picture element, I've got a source element in there, and what I'm saying is, hey, I actually want to only use this source, this file, when I satisfy this media query, which is minimum width of 36 ems. Okay, and then the source set is actually saying that, hey, I'm going to use large.jpg when the image is bigger than 1024 by width, medium JPEG when it's 640, small JPEG when it's 320, and these are the sizes that you should expect for this image. So that is sort of, if the conditions are true here, that's what's going to display the images. But if it's not, it'll actually fall back to the second source set. And actually here what's happening is that we're saying, hey, use this different image if the device pixel ratio is really high, so a 2x versus a 1x. And then finally you have your fallback, which is just like your small image.jpg, like your regular HTML tag. So this is sort of what you need to do to be able to do responsive images. And all of these features combined let you do this thing called art direction. Which is specify the image that you want to use for the type of width and height that you have on that page, on that device, etc. So obviously, if you think about this, there's going to be so many different images that you might need to create, and as well, there's all this stuff that's happening behind the scenes. The reason why we don't want to maybe send the biggest image possible, and then resize it on the browsers because it takes up a lot of bandwidth. So it's a balancing between art direction and performance as well. So you have to keep that in the back of your minds. When we're going through this, you got to remember that at the end of the day, I want to make sure that my site loads pretty fast and it has an optimal experience for the device and the browser that it's being viewed on. So Ann Thomas covered this quite well earlier this morning. But just keep that in the back of your minds. I won't go into too many details into responsive images anymore. I'm actually going to talk about the art direction piece right now. So why art direction? So in a responsive design, you typically want to target images to fit with the device. So here I have an example. This is taken from use cases for responsive images. It's like a website where the community was making use cases for this standard. So here we have a picture of Bo, who is, I believe, Barack Obama's dog. I think, yeah. And essentially, you can see that on different devices, the picture itself is fairly big. It's got the White House in the background, the dog, the flowers, and everything. But we do want to actually just use the best piece of the image for the device size. We don't want to just resize the whole thing, because then all of a sudden it looks like it's farther away. You lose a lot of it doesn't look as nice. You actually want to sort of crop certain parts of the image for the size of the screen so that you end up with the detail that you want. So here what's happening, if you take a look, you could imagine if we weren't doing art direction here, basically this image here would just be like horizontal here, because it's, again, the aspect ratio is very different on this iPad right here. You guys can see my mouse, right? Okay. And then when it's landscape, well, actually, I sort of want to zoom in on Bo, and then when it's on a phone, I actually just want to show his face because it's absolutely cute, right? So essentially, why art direction? It's to basically handle situations like this. So on a large screen, we might want to show large images with plenty of details, but on a small screen, we want to maybe shrink or crop the image that we think is relevant, right? So there's a bit of artistry, I guess, involved in this, being able to figure out what part of the image actually matters and is the most useful and relevant to the design. It does take a couple of things to sort of think about when going ahead and designing your website. So strategies for achieving this, well, I mean, if you think about it, there's really two ways that you can do this. And ideally in a way that's scalable and that works with the thousands of images that you might have on your website. Who has like over 1,000 images on their website right now that they're sort of handling? Pretty much almost everybody. I know the FITC people do because they always take images all the time. Cool. So, I mean, there's two strategies for achieving this type of art direction. I guess the first strategy is you want full control. All right. So if you want full control, basically what you want to essentially is to manually select the different pieces of the image, and even crop it, or even just choose an entirely different image for the sizes and the aspect ratio that you want. So there's obviously pros and cons with sort of taking this strategy for getting art direction. The pros is you obviously have full artistic control. You can do whatever you want, and you get the best visual effect that way, so you can choose the perfect one. The cons is that this is actually manual and tedious. All right, so because you have to do it manually for every image, and if you have 1,000 images like FITC does, well then this is not going to happen, because I think you have better use of Matthew's time than having him crop images. So the sort of the other strategy that you can sort of take to get this art direction in your images is sort of like, I would call it the best guess approach, and it's really basically you using an algorithm instead to sort of figure out what part of the image we might actually want for this size or crop, or even this aspect ratio. And sort of the pros of this is that it's fully automatable, which is great. So you can actually have like a tool that does this automatically for all the images that you upload. So if you're uploading 1,000 every time you run an event, you don't need to worry about it. The tool will just take care of everything. But obviously, algorithms are not perfect. They're not as good, at least for when it comes to like computer vision. Computer vision is a very intense research topic right now, and it has been for the last like 30 years. So obviously, it's not perfect, and you're going to have your algorithm actually miss what it should resize, or just not even know and just do a center resize. So keep those at the back of your mind. Two strategies for actually achieving this: the full control approach, where you do everything yourself manually, and the best guess approach. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to show you tools for both of these things. So I hate writing excessive HTML. I don't know about you, but I actually, if I had to write a picture element and then like 3 lines of tags inside for every single picture on my web page, I would probably cry, because it's just not something I want to do. And I don't want to do manual cropping either. So it's tedious, boring, and I hate it. But really, I'll actually show you tools that let you do both. So you can do the manual control, like the manual sort of cropping that you want to do, and I'll show you tools that will let you do that automatically. So let's start exploring these tools, and so just keep your mind, keep it in the back of your mind that I'm showing you these tools not because they're able to resize the images automatically or necessarily. I'm showing you these tools because you can actually go ahead and do either a manual control and sort of select the cropping or that you want or the picture that you want to use. So like just keep that in mind because there are plenty of tools out there that will generate images for you based off like a big master image. These are the only ones that let you do art direction. Either algorithmically, like best guess using an algorithm, or you manually going into the tool and actually choosing those crops. So this one is really awesome. It's called Smartcrop.js, and it's a JavaScript library that you could run both on the backend inside Node and on the browser front end. And the way that it works is really interesting. So it's a little bit sketchy in the sense that like it doesn't always produce perfect crops because you'll see like how the tool works. And like this is a problem with computer vision in general. Like computer vision is an incredibly difficult problem because we just don't really even understand how our own eyes work entirely and how our brain sort of processes images. So like we don't have like 100% understanding of that. And then we're also trying to get a computer to do that as well, which is like a very different type of machine. So the way that SmartCrop works is actually pretty clever, but at the same time, I like it's not perfect either. So the first thing that it does is it actually looks for edges. So if you can see in our image back here, this is sort of, keep this in the back of your mind, it's basically looking for this guy. So this is the full image. When it crops it into sort of some thumbnail mode, it's actually looking for him. We don't really care about sort of the darkness on the side here, right? You guys agree with me? Like I think that the main subject of the photo is the guy sitting on the bench. So what SmartCrop does is it looks for edges using this Laplace mathematical formula, and then it looks for regions with a color that's sort of like skin color. Okay, so this is a very common thing in photography. You do white balancing and all that stuff. So it's roughly the same idea here. You're looking for the skin tone, and then it looks for regions high in saturation as well. And then what it'll do is it'll actually generate a bunch of these candidate crops using a sliding window, and it'll rank them using an importance function that focuses on the detail in the center and avoids having lots of edges, lots of edge space. And then it'll output the best crop that it thinks it found. Right? So it works fairly well, actually, but there'll obviously be a lot of misses as well. It's not a perfect algorithm, of course, but it does work fairly well. And if you want to actually use it inside your browser, you can. But the more interesting piece for me, anyways, because I don't want to do this mathematical stuff in the user's browser as they're trying to load my app. That's just silly. What I actually want to do instead is run this on the back end, sort of produce these images right away. So you can actually use it as a CLI tool. And to do that, you do npm install -g smartcrop CLI. And then it's basically a tool that you could use. You pass it the width and height that you want or your crop to be. And then you pass it the image, and it'll just output to another JPEG. It's actually fairly complicated to set up, even on a MacBook, and it's even more complicated on a Windows machine. And I work for Microsoft, so I think I've had a fair experience trying to get this type of stuff to set up. So basically, the reason why it's very complicated is because SmartCrop actually needs a browser to be able to do all this cropping. So what it does is it tries to, you need to actually install like a bunch of dependencies, and it runs Node Canvas to be able to then go ahead and do the cropping and then output something. So it's fairly annoying and complicated. And if you need help getting this running on Windows 10, just tweet at me. I've gone through the whole process. It's fairly difficult. You gotta compile like GTK and get the Node Canvas installed properly to get it to work. But it is very complicated, but it does the job. So it does it fairly well. But there is a weakness here, and you guys should recognize this right away. You have to tell it the width and height of the best crop that you want. Right? So that's right off the bat something that's going to be really annoying. because you have your image, right? But you actually don't necessarily know what the best sizing would be, like sort of what size of the image should be to fit best inside your web page, so that you have an optimal file performance thing, ranking. So if you remember from Anne's talk, she covered performance issues. So this is a bit of a weakness here, but what I'll do towards the end is I'll actually show you a tool that lets you, basically what it does is it figures out what the best breakpoints are for your image, and then you could take those sort of dimensions and pass that to Smartcrop. So when it does that cropping, it uses that image dimension instead. So I'll show you that at the end. So these are non-free tools. What I did find is a lot of non-free tools actually did the job fairly well. This one's called Imgix. I don't really know how to say it. And it does, you know how Smartcrop uses this algorithm, it looks for edges and looks for skin tone. What Imgix does is it does two different types of cropping instead. It does face-based cropping, so it'll actually go look for a face in the picture. So that's one way you could set it up. Or you could set it up to do entropy cropping, which is this other idea. So if you want to basically, it's a mathematical algorithm. I won't go into the details. But basically, this is the entropy version of this image. And you can see that the entropy version eliminates a lot of the background and lets us focus on sort of the main character in the picture. So there's two ways using this tool to do this. Both of those are different from Smartcrop's way. This is a great tool. It's also not free. It's called Cloudinary. Any of you use it? 1, 2 people? Great. And basically, it has very similar features as Imgix, actually. And it does what they call smart cropping as well. And there's actually different ways that it does cropping. You have multiple options, and the other cool thing about it is that you can go manually and crop it yourself. So you have the manual control if that's what you want to do. But the interesting one is that it basically uses this other service called, or I'm not sure if they own that service as well, but it's Imagga, IMAGGA. And what it looks for is like an area of interest in the picture, and then it crops it around that. So you're able to do that. The other thing that I can do as well is aspect ratio based cropping, and then you can also tell it to crop normally, but give a gravity to where it crops, so it'll actually move that crop region. And let me actually show you what the type of output it gives. So what I have here is actually, I have a demo account, and I have a picture that I've uploaded already. This is what it looks like, all right? But you can see right away that this entire region here is pointless. Right, this is not the main part of the image. The main part of the image is here, right? So when I tell it to actually use this mode, what it does, and I give it a width and a size, this is the output that it gives me. So if I take a look at it, you can see here that it keeps me in the picture, right? And it gets most of the slide in, the presentation in. So it is fairly effective, and they do have APIs as well, so that you can actually connect this with an API and do this programmatically if you wanted to. It's great. This one is also really interesting, but it's mostly interesting if you just want to do everything manually. It's called Sizzlepig, and it basically gives you a web UI. You can set all the different types of ratios and aspect ratios and dimensions that you want, and then you can actually go manually and crop things. This one is also really good. It's called responsive.io, and it's designed to be a service that optimizes and delivers perfect images for your every screen, blah, blah, blah. But really what it does is it actually does this thing called focal point cropping and smart zoom, right? So it essentially, it looks for the area of interest in the image, and then depending on the sizing, it'll actually zoom out or zoom in, okay? And then it will stick to that focal point. I'm not sure if I have it loaded up, but I did want to show you a demo. Actually, we'll just do that because we're running out. Are we running out of time? Are we good? You're good? Okay. Cool. We'll do it maybe at the end. So nothing is perfect, unfortunately. But Smartcrop.js, it's a sketchy algorithm a little bit. It doesn't really figure out the responsive image breakpoints. You have to do that yourself. Imgix is interesting, but it's not free, and you also have to host the images yourself on like an S3 bucket or whatever. Cloudinary does everything, but you sort of have to program an API to do the responsive image breakpoints. Otherwise, you'd have to set it yourself. But it does do the art direction fairly well. Sizzlepig is no automation; it's all manual work. And then responsive IO is amazing, but needs money, and it's quite expensive. Cool. So once we sort of figured out how to actually do this art direction, whether you take the manual or the automatic approach, like the automatable approach, you still have to integrate this into a backend. So just out of curiosity, who's a WordPress developer, PHP, something like that? Okay, a few people. How about JavaScript, Node.js? The rest of you guys? Okay, how about Ruby on Rails? Really? I would expect more Ruby guys. Just one person. Okay. So that's great because I cover all of those. So here's how you do it with Smartcrop. So essentially, there's this other library called connect-thumbs. It's a connect middleware. So if you use Express or Koa, you can actually just use this. Actually, I'm not sure about Koa, but like if you use Express or Connect, you can add this middleware to your application. And it has a dependency on ImageMagick or GraphicsMagick and Cairo. And essentially what it does is after you add the middleware, it basically creates this URL scheme, so /thumbs, where if you request an image from your server, you can tell it how to crop it and what sizing and all that stuff by just passing in like the size that you want, like medium, and then you pass in a base64 version of the URL of that image, the original image, on your and it could be on your server or you could be somewhere else. The function that actually decodes this base64, you can actually customize that. So instead of having it go get a URL, like an image from a URL, you can tell it to go get an image from a database or something, because you can pass whatever you want as a result in that base64. And so it'll do that on the fly for you, which is fine, I guess, if you don't have a lot of images, but it's not optimal because it doesn't let you automate it. It doesn't let you do it offline, but it is one way to do that. When it comes to WordPress, the really cool thing about WordPress is that responsive images are now part of the core as of 4.4, which is amazing. And it's actually really transparent, so a user never actually sees this responsive image piece. It's sort of just the minute that your image is uploaded, WordPress will sort of figure out like the sizing, and then when you ask to get that like WP get image attachment or whatever, that function call, it'll actually output the pictures or the source sets for you in an image tag. So you don't even need to worry about responsive images, which is actually really awesome, and it helps you reduce the bandwidth and great performance if you keep that in the back of your mind. But of course, it's not really great for art direction because you have no control at all over what it does. So there isn't really anything possible right now without paying for a service like Cloudinary. Cloudinary does have a plugin that you could add to your WordPress, and you'll be able to serve images from Cloudinary, but there isn't any other way to do art direction in WordPress right now. So this is an excellent opportunity for a plugin that might make a lot of money on WordPress. So, yeah. The other thing, when it comes to Ruby on Rails, Smartcrop actually has a Rails gem, so it's a suite, so you're able to integrate it into your Rails 4 application. But other than that, there's not many solutions out there to do art direction, unfortunately. But once you reach this point as a developer, you're sort of like I just have to do this myself, right? I don't know about you, but none of these solutions sort of hit what I needed, which was a way to do this automatically and a way to do it offline, so that I didn't have to do this as part of a request on the web. I needed to be ready already, and I want it to be free. I don't want to pay for things. I don't pay for things. So here's the best solution that I have for you. And you can see that this is really a journey, and this is really cutting edge stuff. Very few people have solved these problems yet, but if you can solve them, that's probably a very great startup opportunity for you. So here's what I have an idea for how you could do this. So if you remember with Smartcrop, there was a problem of not knowing the image dimensions right away. You have to sort of manually figure that out. Well, you can actually use this new tool that was open sourced by Cloudinary, surprisingly, that generates these, and I actually have it loaded up. It'll generate the breakpoints for your image. So let's say that I upload an image, okay? I can actually set like the max resolution that this image should expect, okay? So in other words, like I know for a fact that I'm not going to cover more than a width of 960 pixels in my web design, because that's the max container width that I chose, right? So I can actually tell it what sort of maximum resolution I want, and I can even tell it, hey, when you're optimizing to figure out the breakpoints of this image, why don't you basically do the steps for every single image for that breakpoint in 20 kilobytes or 60 kilobytes or 50 kilobytes. And then you can tell it the maximum amount of images that you want to generate as a result. So when you run this, you'll get your original aspect ratio, like your original image, in a bunch of different dimensions, and then the file sizes that they yield. All right, so essentially that's what it looks like in the image, but it's actually not this cropping. It's a resize to fit in the image. It doesn't do any art direction for you. It just resizes it. And then this is the HTML image tag that would be generated if you were going to use this setup. Okay, so this is really useful because it gives us the dimensions that we need. Okay, and we know for a fact that these dimensions are going to be very performance oriented, so very small file sizes, and that's precisely what this thing does. It looks for that, the optimal like responsive image sizes. So once you have those sizes, if we go back to our presentation, I'll show you the next step. You can actually use this thing called cognitive services, and essentially it has a bunch of computer vision APIs, and among those computer vision APIs, there's this thumbnail API, and it does the smart cropping for you. So it does that using basically the region of interest in the picture, and it will crop with the size that you give it that image. So you can use this, which is free and very effective, or you could use the smart crop way, but I could never get smart crop to run properly, so this is one way to do it. And just to show you what that looks like, here's an example. You can see my email here. I've signed up. I got this subscription to this computer vision API. Just to show you what this basically does. It's just a REST API. You can use it to analyze images, recognize celebrities, and the important part is right here, generate a thumbnail. And what it will do is it'll analyze the picture and find the area of interest. And then when it creates this thumbnail that you pass it, you basically get the area of interest right there. So it's sort of like Smartcrop, but it actually doesn't use the way the Smartcrop does it, because I actually don't find that effective. This is a method that's very similar to actually Cloudinary's. And the other cool thing is that if you really wanted to, there are other APIs as well in cognitive services. Among them is the Face API. Okay, where did this browser take me? Okay, if you go to the Face API, you can actually send the image and it will detect the face. And then you could tell it to basically crop around this face rectangle to keep that face in the picture. So this is basically you building, so if you remember when I showed you, I forgot which service now, but it was one of the non-free ones. Like Cloudinary did it, but Imgix did this, the face cropping. Okay, so you can actually use just cognitive services, which is these free APIs, to this machine learning backend to basically reproduce Imgix, but for yourselves for free. So that's pretty awesome. And the way that it works is actually quite straightforward. If you go into the documentation, you get this you can go to the thumbnail API, and you just basically request something to this URL with the width, height, and if you want smart cropping on or off. And what that will do, you can pass the image as a URL, or you can actually just give it the binary image data, and it will return binary image data for you, which is just containing the image. So to show you like how you could do that automatically, because at the end of the day, like, we're really close here. Like, I'm trying to sneak in here and like use all these things for free and build the best tool. So we're so close. Like the sweet smell of victory, you know, it's bacon, yes. So to automate this whole mess, and unfortunately I didn't have time to write the plugins for you, but that is your homework. I'm showing you how to do it. So here in the end, these are the steps, right? So if you wanted to automate with Webpack, so again, our objectives was to automate this art direction that does it in a way that's smart, using either the Face API or the region of interest API from the computer vision in cognitive services. And the other thing is I want to make this transparent. Like, as a developer, I don't want to care about this. Once I've got this working, I just want it to work, right? So to do this with Webpack actually is probably the easiest way. What you would do is every time you require the image, you pass it your sort of plugin to Webpack, and what you could do is immediately send that to the responsive breakpoints generator to get your image, image dimensions. And there's something that I didn't mention, but the wonderful guys at Cloudinary also open source this tool. So you can actually go to GitHub and download it yourself, and you could also use their API as well. But it is open source and it is on GitHub already. So you get those image dimensions, and then what you would do is you would pass those image dimensions to one of the two APIs in cognitive services and have it crop around that with those dimensions instead of just doing a resize. So you're able to do the automatic art direction that way. And then you just output this image to a build folder. So you get this right away from cognitive services as a binary data that you can just write to a file. And to show you the code for that, I actually do have some sample code. So here I am. I'm inside Visual Studio Code. Let me actually just pop open the preferences here just so I can show you a little bit of a bigger font size. Okay, great. So here what I've got is, again, this is very straightforward. I've got just a request module that basically lets me do a REST call. I'm going to post to the Project Oxford API. This is like the code name for cognitive services. And the thing, though, that I do have to pass right away is the width and the height, and whether I want smart cropping on or off. You can actually tell it to crop without the smart cropping, and I'll just do a proper crop. And it's not a resize. I pass in my subscription key. You can see it there. I'll regenerate later, so you can't use mine. Haha. The thing with cognitive services is, yes, it is free up to, I think, 15,000 requests a day or something like that. So I think you're good. The other thing is that you can either pass it like the binary image data, or here what I've done is I actually just straight up pass it a link. But if you recall in the API, you can pass it, where is it? You can pass it like the sort of binary image data right away, okay? So you don't have to upload your image somewhere and then pass it to the API. And then what I do is, the minute I get a response, if there's no error, I just create this write stream, and that just basically writes to this thumb.jpg the binary data that I got back from the API. To show you this running, so the image that I have, and I'll prove it to you that this is a real image and it's not like me faking anything. So this is my image. Okay, you can see this fairly long, right? And this is not as useful as this piece. You know, like this piece up here, I can crop that out if I wanted to change my aspect ratio. So what I've done here is I've sent it this new width and height that I want, with a 1000, height 750, and I told it to do a smart crop. And when I run this code, and I'll put it up on Gist on GitHub, it takes a while to run because it's actually sending all that data. And then at the end, so you can see here, it's refreshed. This is the crop that I get, which is the smarter crop that I need, cutting the top part out, as opposed to this guy right here. So that's how you could do it yourself with Webpack. Now, if you want to do it with WordPress, you would have to write a filter that runs every time someone uploads an image, and then just replaces the responsive image stuff that WordPress generates with your own stuff using SmartCrop and all that stuff. So what did we learn? Art-directed responsive images. Yay! It was very complicated and very odd, and it was an interesting journey for me. But hopefully you guys would have learned something really interesting from this. I showed you how to use Smartcrop.js, Imgix, Cloudinary, and other tools, how to deal with different web backends, whether it's Node.js, WordPress, Ruby on Rails, and then to build the ultimate system, to build my own system that has the properties of free, automatic, like automatable, and does this all offline, so not while serving something to a browser. I showed you how to do that with different APIs out there. And then finally, your homework is to actually write the Gulp plugin, the Webpack plugin, and the WordPress plugin. So thank you very much.